Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's training on how to have difficult conversations. I just wanted to let everybody know that this training is provided to you by the Nebraska Department of Education, and it is a grant-funded training by the Department of Health and Human Services, Substance Abuse, and Mental Health Service Administration. So like I said, today we're going to talk about how to have difficult conversations. And in order to do that, I want to start with this quote by Channing. What happens if we honor the conflict in our life and what the conflict can help us do and how it can help us grow? If we're always trying to maintain peace and equanimity, we don't actually get into the place where the conflict of the moment actually moves into a position to be more dynamically invested in our growth. Now, you may not fully understand exactly what I was thinking when I thought, hey, this quote is perfect for difficult conversations discussion. So I think that the biggest takeaway or the biggest aspect of it is I want us to honor the growth, right? This training is about difficult conversations, and yet I want you to honor the growth. And all of this is because I want you to change your mindset regarding this quote unquote difficult conversations. Far too often, we focus on the negative sides of life rather than the positive, right? Our glass remains half empty rather than half full. And the truth is, difficult conversations, truly, what are they about? They're about growth. And what do we know about growth? It is uncomfortable. I mean, look at kids. They get growing pains. My leg hurts, mommy. My arms hurt. My back hurts, right? Or whenever we are confronted with an aspect of ourselves that we need to change, it is uncomfortable. And sometimes we're like, all right, I'd just like to chill out, not have to grow anymore at this point in my life. Thank you very much. And that is completely understandable. But growth is unavoidable. It's going to happen whether we welcome it into our lives or we attempt to resist it. But truly, when we think about growth, isn't that what this whole human journey is truly all about? It's about becoming our best self. It's about watching others become their best self. And we can't do that without the uncomfortability of growth and difficult conversations. So again, welcome. It's me, Angie Stevens. I am a licensed independent clinical social worker, which is just a bunch of mumbo jumbo to say I am a social worker and a licensed therapist. I am really excited to talk about this topic because it is truly one of my favorite topics. A lot of it is just about the simplicity of holding space, just holding space for people to feel uncomfortable while you also feel uncomfortable, right? So I want to tell you a couple fun facts about me. I am a karaoke champion, like for real. I mean, like I've won money. There was one competition that I should have won. I'm pretty sure that the judges knew the gal who beat me, which felt rigged, not gonna lie. Was, I'm not bitter about it or anything, right? If you can't tell, but very frustrating. I also have a podcast with my best friend where we interview guests and discuss various topics related to mental health. Our podcast is called The Shrink Show. Give it a listen if you like. The audio took a hot minute for us to kind of figure out. So if you listen to an earlier episode, I promise you the audio does get better over time. We're also on YouTube. And I was in the Thanksgiving Macy's Day Parade in 1995, just kind of aging myself a little bit. But I was a Heartland Hoedowner clogger. Woo, woo. If there are any cloggers in the house, props to you. At Renee's School of Dance. I'm not gonna lie, I may or may not have just signed my 7-year-old daughter up for clogging. and I'm super pumped. I hope she loves it as much as I did because I just want to watch it. Here's a quote by David White. The courageous conversation is the one you don't want to have. And isn't that ultimately what difficult conversations are about? They're ones that we don't want to have, right? So what classifies a difficult conversation? It truly can be anything. I've listed a couple, but this is not an all exhaustive list because what I find difficult might not be what you find difficult. Some people who are more introverted, a difficult conversation might just be the small talk at the gas station with the clerk, right? Anything can be considered a difficult conversation. It is, by definition, something that causes you to feel discomfort. The term difficult means needing much effort or skill to accomplish, deal with, or understand. So it requires a lot of us. So one example of a difficult conversation can be having a terminal illness. And that could be having the difficult conversation with a child, or telling your spouse, or even being on the receiving end. How do you hold that space for somebody who tells you that they have a terminal illness? How do you hold the space necessary for them and also feel what it is that you need to feel? Loss of a loved one. This one is especially difficult when you have to have this conversation with a child. My oldest stepson, his mother passed away several years back, and having that conversation with him about the loss of his mother was very difficult. Having the conversation with all of my children when their grandfather passed a couple years ago, also very difficult, because what happens during those conversations? Well, where did they go? Well, what happened? Sometimes people respond with no emotion, no affect. Sometimes people respond with scream crying and intense feelings. Sometimes people respond with denial. And I think for me anyway, when I look at my struggles that I've had over my life with difficult conversations, it tends to be that unpredictability on the side of the person that I'm having the conversation with, right? So when we had that conversation about the loss of grandpa to my children, my now 7-year-old began sob crying hysterically. My now 16-year-old, he had already experienced major loss. So his response was a little more subdued, sad, but subdued. My now 9-year-old, had to question everything. Like he needed to know why. What happened? How did this happen? What does this world look like that where I don't have a grandpa? That's where it's the most trying, I suppose, is that preparation of what can be their response and how do I respond if I don't know how they will respond. Breakups. I mean, breakups for some people seem to be super simple, not a difficult conversation. They're like deuces, but for others, it's a lot. Asking for a raise. Oh boy, isn't that a tough one, right? Corrective action. So you can think of this as a supervisee and a supervisor. You can think of this as a caregiver and a child. You can think of this really as any sort of where there's a hierarchy of somebody over another person, right? I'm going to need you to correct this. I had a friend once. She really struggled when she became a supervisor to have these difficult conversations with her staff. And we talked about it one night and she's like, I just don't know. I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want to offend them. I don't want them to feel bad. And my argument to that was, well, they're already feeling bad if they're not doing it correctly, whether they realize it or not, because there's going to be consequences. They're going to be corrected in some way, shape, or form. Or, in today's society, sometimes it's just a matter of people talking behind their back, right? Their colleagues talking behind their back. Oh God, did you see? Sally never gets her paperwork in on time. So if you're that supervisor and you don't have that conversation with them, you're doing Sally a disservice. If Sally thinks that she's doing a good job, how does she know that there are things that she needs to work on? That didn't help her as much as when I had suggested that ultimately we're all wanting to do our best. We're all wanting to be our best self, right? So if we're all wanting to be our best self, how can I be my best self if I don't know that I am not being my best self? If I don't have anything to compare it to, or if nobody points it out, think of a coach. Can you imagine a coach or a dance instructor or a music instructor never providing feedback or guidance when it comes to the sport or the music that they're playing or the dance steps? If they never provided that feedback in order to improve the person who is on the receiving end, then how great would their performance truly be? Probably not as good as it could be, right? So when you think about that in terms of having that difficult conversation, it's a lot easier, right? Because I'm not correcting you because I think you're a jerk who doesn't care. I'm not correcting you because I'm a jerk who doesn't care. I'm correcting you because I want you to do your best and be your best self. And here's how you can do that. Now, ultimately, they get to choose, right? And we'll get to that a little later. Constructive criticism. Okay, I'm not going to lie. This was one that I may or may not have struggled with a little bit growing up. And by growing up, I mean like still sometimes struggle with it, right? Because I think when somebody is telling you that what you did hurt their feelings or what you did they didn't think was the best choice, it is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable because it forces you to confront something within yourself, right? And so many of these difficult conversations, these growth conversations, they're difficult because they're conversations we don't even want to have with ourselves. If I have a terminal illness, I don't want to admit to myself that I have a terminal illness. If I've lost a loved one, I don't want to have that conversation with myself because it hurts. If I have made a mistake, how often do we jump to I am a mistake or I am a failure rather than I've just learned one way to not do things, right? I've learned one way to not succeed. I coined that. I don't know if I coined it, but I feel like I coined it when my girlfriend and I were talking about college. And I went to college when I was 19 and I failed 2 semesters in a row. And apparently, if you just stop going to school, they fail you. Joke. I actually knew that would happen, but I didn't care at the time because schooling wasn't for me. And I think that was the biggest thing was I didn't necessarily fail, even though I did fail the classes and I had to retake them once I decided to go to school several years later. I learned what success didn't look like for me at the time. I learned how not to succeed. I could not succeed in college when I was 19. I just couldn't. I was not in a place in my life where that was something that I could focus on or something I even knew that I wanted. I needed to wait until later. So again, keeping that in mind when we think about that constructive criticism, the person might react and they might feel uncomfortable, but ultimately, doesn't that say more about them than it does you? Setting boundaries is a big one. That is a very difficult conversation, because it requires us to stand in our power, right? It requires us to be assertive and to create a limitation on the other person. Many of you may not know, my biological mother has schizophrenia and bipolar. And having grown up with her in and out of my life, the interactions that I had with her when she didn't take her medication were very, very difficult and very trying. When I was pregnant with my first biological child, now 9-year-old, I said to my mother, my kids will never see the mom that I saw. So if you decide to stop taking your medication, that's fine. You just won't have interactions with your grandchildren until you're back on your medication. I'll continue to talk to you. I will continue to see you, but I will not expose my children to that. And for me, that was a tough conversation because, I mean, in my opinion, there's nobody more unpredictable than my mom with schizophrenia and bipolar, right? You never know how she's going to react. At the time, she reacted very positively, and she was like, okay. And I got to be honest, there's only been one time where she got a little low. She kind of started skirting her medication a little bit. And I kind of started keeping my distance and figuring out ways to help her get back on track. But she has never reached the depths that she reached when I was a child. When we avoid difficult conversations, we trade short-term discomfort for long-term dysfunction. Peter Bromberg. I think this is really important because sometimes we think, oh, I just won't have this conversation. It's fine. It's fine. I'm fine. You know, this person can continue treating me like this, or that person can continue to not uphold their end of the contract, or, you know, I just don't want to be disruptive, or I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable. When in reality, we're making ourselves uncomfortable when we avoid those conversations. It may not be in that moment, right? But if you think about sweeping a room, the more you sweep the room and shove it under the rug, the bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger that rug becomes. And at some point, that rug has to be lifted up and all of that junk has to be cleaned out. And it usually ends up being a lot more explosive. Think about anytime you've held something in and held it in, bit your tongue, and then all of a sudden that friend or that parent or that teacher or that spouse or what have you, person in our life did or said something that was like the last straw and we just exploded or imploded and it destroyed the relationship. Avoiding these difficult conversations is of no benefit to anybody, which is why I am so passionate about it, because I don't think they are as difficult as we are making it out to be. If we can just change difficult to growth, a growth conversation, right? That's all we're having is a growth conversation. So here are a few questions to assess and prepare for difficult/growth conversations, depending on whether you still prefer your glass to be half empty or half full. These are things that I actually run through in my mind prior to having these conversations. You know, who is involved, right? So is it just my spouse, or am I wanting to have a conversation with my spouse about our children? Is it, you know, if I'm a caregiver and I need to have a conversation with the school district about upholding the IEP and I feel that they're not doing that. So Who are the players involved? Is it just one teacher? Is it a whole team of teachers? Is it the principal, right? Knowing the players involved gives you an idea of the possible responses that you could receive from that, right? If one of those teachers is a lot more meek and mild, okay, you might not get a huge pushback from that particular teacher. If one of the other teachers is very outspoken and shuts you down a lot, okay, you have a better idea of how to prepare. That kind of leads to the second one, like, what are the facts involved in this? And this includes your personal biases and the emotions that you have surrounding this situation. This is so important, right? Your personal biases of, well, this person never listens to me anyway. Okay, well, that's important for you to keep in mind, because that is going to influence how you decide to go about this conversation with them. If you feel that they never listen to you anyway, then you're going to potentially address them more aggressively and not listen to them in return. And if that's the case, then the success of this conversation is not going to be very high. Or your personal biases of, the loss of a loved one, that, the only thing I can think of is like heaven, right? Do you believe in heaven? Is that what you're going to tell your children, that grandpa went to heaven? What if your children ask more questions about heaven? Or what if they're like, I don't believe in heaven, because they're older and they're like, I just don't. How does that change the conversation? How does that change the emotions with which you feel, right? The facts also in the emotions within this. Are you extremely passionate and heated about this, right? Doing that check-in with your body and that check-in with yourself is extremely important for you to move forward successfully. Because if you're feeling heated and you're feeling angry or riled up, or you get to this point where you just start screaming and yelling and throwing out, all of these accusations, well, it might not have been the best time for you to have that conversation. So if you decide to have a difficult conversation, then you find yourself in that moment, then it's a good time to maybe take a step back, to pause the conversation. But the only way you can come up with these game plans is by recognizing how you feel about this entire situation. Okay. So again, that body check-in and those plans, it's kind of like having a tornado drill and a fire drill. You're not having a tornado drill and a fire drill because you really hope that there's a tornado and then there's a fire, right? In that crisis moment, it's going to be a cluster, right? But we do that because we want to be prepared should that alarm go off. Your body is a fantastic alarm. Your body can tell you when you are boiling over or when you're about to shut down. And that is when you can be like, I need to pause. And sometimes that can even be a conversation that you have at the beginning. I feel very strongly about my child getting their needs met through their IEP. And in the past, I know I've gotten really, really heated when I don't feel heard or understood, and I only see red. So I'm going to do my best to keep my emotions in check and truly listen to the conversation. But if I reach that point, I'm just going to let everybody know I will have to pause, because I will no longer be able to see the forest through the trees. And that then leads to, when is the best time to address this topic? If somebody comes home and they've had a really bad day, is that the best time to, do some constructive criticism? Perhaps not. doesn't mean that that conversation isn't still important, because it can be, and more than likely is. But if your loved one or child comes home and they had a really rough day, it's probably not the time to indulge in, hey, by the way, I really feel that you need to work on blah, 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 right? Not a good idea. Where in your body do you feel triggered? So this kind of goes in line with recognizing your emotions. And I love this one because I can recognize my emotions, but the emotional recognition oftentimes comes with this sense of logic, right? It comes with how I see the emotion, and how much easier is it to recognize the emotion after I've already done it, right? Oh, I was angry about that. Oops, my bad, right? But for me personally, I know that I am losing it when I have a lump in my throat. When I get a lump in my throat, I am either about to scream at you or break down crying. I also know when I get those like butterfly feelings in my stomach, I am uncomfortable and I'm starting to get pissed, right? I'm starting to feel not grounded anymore. And so for me, recognizing those is important, because then I can bring them back down. When I start feeling that feeling in my stomach, maybe I need to back away a little bit from the conversation, or perhaps I need to take a deep breath or count to 10. Whatever your technique is, you use that when you can feel your body being triggered. Why is it important to have this conversation? Why is it important for you to have this conversation? Knowing your why can help guide your direction. And how can you approach this to achieve the best possible outcome for all involved? So coming at, storming in the school with a team of lawyers, guns blazing, probably is not going to achieve the best outcome for all involved, including your child, right? So how can this conversation be approached in a way that is thoughtful, that is considerate, but also doesn't demean your message and what you're trying to get across? One helpful tip that I like to include is sometimes difficult conversations aren't even necessary, right? I like to ask myself, like, is this conversation worth it? And this also helps me know when a conversation that I really, 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 really don't want to have, and I'm trying to talk myself out of it by, the facts are, it's not that big of a deal. And I'm not really that upset about it. Well, is it worth it? Is the relationship worth it? Is the situation worth it? Is the potential outcome worth it? Let me give you a couple of examples of this after I take a quick drink. I got a job a few years back, and it was my first couple months on the job as social worker. And this was at a school, actually. And one of my students had made suicidal statements. And I hadn't worked as a school social worker before. I was trying to navigate this. So I pulled the young man to assess and figure out how I should move forward with this. Now, come to find out, almost every student, this was a behavioral school, so almost every student all the time would make suicidal statements whenever they were angry. So over time, my approach turned a little bit different in order to achieve the same goal. However, in this moment, I was trying to do what I felt was in this child, this family, and this school's best interest. This looked much different than the previous social worker who had been there. So I had kept the child for quite some time, and the classroom teacher became frustrated with me, and had a few, irritating words towards me. Now, I was uncomfortable. It instantly made me uncomfortable because I wasn't trying to irritate her. I wasn't trying to keep the kid out of the classroom. I wasn't trying to keep him from his education. I also was new to this. So as I'm trying to navigate all of this, I asked myself, okay, I'm uncomfortable. I want to have a conversation with her, but is this a conversation that I even need to have? Or is this something that is better to just kind of let it blow over? Now, at the time, I decided this was an important conversation to have because I needed her to understand where I was coming from. I also needed to understand where she was coming from because she kind of snapped at me rather than explaining it to me. And I didn't fully grasp why she was so upset. So I deemed this to be a difficult conversation, a growth conversation time. And I went and spoke with her. But to me, even though she and I did not have an intimate relationship, we were going to have to work together for several students over the course of however many years. So in that regard, yes, the relationship was worth it. The situation was also worth it because I was trying to learn. There wasn't any sort of rule book. I was just kind of flying by the seat of my pants. And I wanted to figure out what was truly in the best interest of everybody involved. How can I move forward and also help you feel heard, right? At first, the conversation was still a little rough, but we eventually got to, a beautiful ending, and in fact became really great friends. So again, sometimes, difficult conversations might not be worth it, right? If somebody at the gas station says something to you that pisses you off, is it worth having a difficult conversation with them? Is it worth telling them how you feel? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you're discovering your power and standing up for yourself. In that case, yeah, it is. If it's something that should just roll off your back and not let it bother you, and if you engage in that conversation, it's going to bother you and it's going to you're going to hold on to it for a while, then no, it's not really worth it. So these are important to assess when you are looking at preparing to have these conversations. Across the field of difficult conversation lies serenity. Whatever the outcome's going to be, at least you know. Shonda Rhimes. I love this quote because if I have a conversation with you as my friend and I say, hey, this action that was done really hurt my feelings, and I'm not quite sure what to do with that, but I wanted to provide you with that information and see how we can move forward. If my friend responds with, F you, stupid, who are you? What are you saying? This is dumb. Okay, well, now I get to have a choice. If this friend does not want to truly consider my needs and my feelings when I offer them in a loving way, do I want to continue in this relationship? Do I want to continue moving forward knowing that the possibility of this friend holding space for me doesn't exist? So in that regard, I get to set a boundary. I get to determine how to move forward. This is one of the reasons I love having these difficult conversations too, is it has really helped me prune people out of my life that aren't really adding to my highest good. They're not really taking into consideration my best interest. Now, I'm not saying that there are not moments where, somebody might respond because they're in their emotions and it may trigger something within their emotional body. Yes, Okay. But if they come back to you and they say, hey, you know what, I thought about that and I'm so sorry. All right. Then I have a different decision to make. But if they never do and continue to gaslight me and make me seem like I'm the only one that has the problem and I'm the only one that continues to make this mistake or not explain, why or what they were thinking. Or if you think about this between the school and, the caregiver, if I'm coming to the school with concern for my child and I've come several times and I've come with love and the teacher continues to dismiss what I am saying, continues to disregard and, kind of cast me aside. Okay, well, now I know what to expect from this teacher. I now get a choice. Do I leave it there or do I move up the ladder? Right? Difficult conversations allow you to make the next best choice for you and what it is that you are needing or desiring. Some effective communication strategies, and I know that several people already know this, but as a therapist, I wanted to really kind of hone in on these. Active listening. Active listening is so hard to do when you are engaged in a potentially heated discussion. I just think about, like with my spouse, right? When he is arguing with me about something, I'm thinking of my next response, or I'm thinking of all the times, all the examples so that I can just flash it at him rather than sitting and truly hearing what it is that he is saying. We so often want to be heard, but we don't take the time to listen. And when you are having these difficult conversations, you cannot do that if your goal is to only be heard. It's not going to work. You have to also listen or the growth doesn't happen, right? Even if the person that you're having the conversation with just sits there in silence, you're still listening because you're holding space for them to process their thoughts, process their emotions, and maybe think through what their response is going to be. And that is incredibly important. Again, that is where the growth happens. Empathic responses. That's responding from a place of compassion, a place of love. So when somebody tells us, I'm sorry that I have caused you to feel some type of way, that was not my intention. And I am truly, truly sorry. That's it. I empathically heard that I hurt your feelings. Whether I meant to do it or not, your reality is that I hurt your feelings. And how often do we perceive the world based on what we have known? Let's say I have a roommate who can't stand messes. Well, I've got a touch of the ADHD, so I make messes sometimes. And let's say that roommate says, well, what were you going to do with all of this over here? Now, it's possible that they were just saying, like, what are you going to do with all this mess over here? Right? But if in the past, my parent or my caregiver or my trusted adult always got angry with me and was like, why are you leaving this mess? What are you going to do with all of it? It's quite possible that my emotional response to my roommate is going to look similar to the emotional response that I provided to the caregiver, even if they are meaning it in two completely different ways. So if I respond with, well, why are you always accusing me of not picking up after myself? Wow, I'm so sorry. That's actually not at all. Like, yes, it does frustrate me when there are messes, but I truly was just asking because I wanted to help you. And I'm sorry if I caused you to feel like I was criticizing you, because I wasn't. That is such a healing moment for not only the roommate, who now can maybe look at, oh, did I say that some type of way? No, I don't really feel like I did. Okay. Then that roommate can stand in their power. The person on the receiving end, me, right? That's a healing moment for me because now I can hear, what are you going to do with this mess, in a completely loving way rather than in the critical way that my child mind, my emotionally childlike body remembers. I hope that makes sense. Asking open-ended questions is very important as well. Open-ended questions allow for the other person to truly share their thoughts. Well, what about, the way I said that caused you to feel so upset or caused you to feel that I was criticizing you? Seek clarification. So in the same way, I guess the question that I used as an example was very similar to seeking clarification, right? Asking, I guess I don't understand what you mean by I always criticize you. Can you help me understand that? Because I don't feel like I'm doing that, and I don't want you to always feel like I'm criticizing you. So I need to understand it so that I can move forward. Demonstrate respect. Again, recognizing the power of the other person and that we're all only human and we're all processing everything together. That's this human experience. And paraphrasing to ensure your understanding. So, I'm hearing that whenever I say, what are you going to do with this? Or why didn't you do that? I'm hearing you say that causes you to feel criticized. So I guess how would you like me to address when there is a mess? How can we move forward? Because I'm also very uncomfortable with this mess. Framework for having difficult conversations. You can see that I modeled some of that. So, describe, express, specify, and then the consequences. So describing the behavior or situation as completely and objectively as possible, just the facts. If you can stick to only the facts when you are describing the situation, there isn't a lot that can be used against you or that can be twisted. Now, trust me, I've had plenty of people also twist my words when I use just the facts, and it makes me feel like I'm losing my mind. But this is one technique. I'm just giving you several different techniques. You pick the one that works best for you. So Jerry, the last project we worked on, I did all of the setup for the presentation by myself, and it took me almost an hour. Jerry can't really argue with that statement. He wasn't there, or even if he was, he could have seen that it took me almost an hour, but he wasn't because I was there by myself. Express your feelings or thoughts about the behavior situation, but it's really important that you use I statements and not you. You're never there for me. You don't care about this project because you just want me to do all of the work and you still get the credit. When you use you statements, it instantly puts the person on the defensive because now I'm being attacked. When you say, you don't care, or you are always dismissive of my feelings, or you never listen to me, you never follow through with the goal, I am now defending myself. You don't want to put anyone in that defense mode because then the growth is being twisted. The growth is no longer there. Now I'm in protection. I can't grow if I am protecting myself, if I'm guarding myself. The growth can only happen if I feel the room to be in those moments. So using those I statements, and again, only speaking about yourself, like I felt overwhelmed, exhausted, and frustrated, not you made me overwhelmed, exhausted, and frustrated. Can you see the difference? Specify what behavior outcome that you would prefer to happen. I would like for us to work together on the setup for the next presentation. Simple. This is what happened this past time. This is how it made me feel. I don't want to feel that again. So this is what I would like to see happen. And then specify the consequences if this happens, both positive and negative. This way we can complete the setup in less time, giving us both a chance to gather our thoughts before we present. we use this technique often with kids. Clean your room, because I'm exhausted cleaning your room all the time. I would really like it if you went in there and you picked up all of your trash and all of your dirty laundry off the floor before trash day and before laundry day, so that I don't have to go in your room and get all of these things. And, this way, mom has more energy to spend time with you when you ask me to spend time with you, rather than continuing to fold laundry or taking out the trash. Otherwise, I don't have that energy for you, and you're going to have to go play or color by yourself, right? So again, those consequences are important. Remember to be assertive, and most importantly, speak your truth with love. I don't care if it's a stranger. I don't care if it's a colleague, if it's a friend, if it's a spouse, if it's a child. Speak your truth with love for the other person. Somebody once said to me, Angie, how are you able to say some of the really intense things that you say to these kids? Like, I could confront my students, my colleagues, my friends on pretty harsh topics quite often. And I honestly, all I can tell you is my secret was speaking my truth with love. I am telling you this, or I am having this discussion with you because I care enough about you and your future. And I truly believe that in order for you to move forward and be your best self, this is information that you need. Now, I can't hold on to the outcome, right? Because everybody gets a choice. I could tell my students left and right, this is the best way for you to move forward and to deal with this circumstance, in my opinion, or, hey, we cannot continue with this behavior in the classroom, or these will be the consequences. I'm telling you this because I want you to know, even though this is an uncomfortable conversation, I don't want you to feel isolated, or I don't want you to make other people uncomfortable unknowingly. Here are the facts. Here's the truth. I care enough about you because I care enough about everybody. I want everybody to succeed and feel like they are being their best, right? That is the secret. Just check in with that. Speak your truth with love. Speak your truth with love. Let that be your mantra. Because when you are assertive and you say it exactly as it is, you're not sugarcoating things. You're not saying one thing but truly meaning another. You're not pussyfooting around the real agenda. Like, oh, well, I'd really like it if little Timmy had a little bit more assistance in the classroom, when what you're really wanting to say is, I want Tim to have one-on-one support in the classroom all the time. I'm saying this because I love Tim, right? Or I want the well-being of Tim. Now, speaking my truth with love also doesn't mean I'm going to get everything that I want, but at least it gives us that starting point. I had construction done in my house a while back. They're doing a little bit of remodeling, and my husband gets so frustrated with me because I always start up here. Like, here's my ideal. Here's what I want. I don't know anything about construction, but make this magic happen within my, limited budget. And my husband's like, gosh, why do you always have to go there? Just let them tell you what's possible. And I'm like, no, I want to tell them what my dream is, because it's possible they can make that happen within my budget. That's not on me. They can talk me down. So I actually got to the point where I just started saying, okay, listen, I'm starting up here. You're going to have to tell me if this is truly practical or not, and tell me what would work within this space, because I have a hard time envisioning it. I'm just telling you what I want. So that sets the stage for how we move forward. I have to be willing to take, and I have to be willing to give. There's this give and take when it comes to these conversations. But when you are assertive and you speak your truth with love, it does decrease the defensiveness of the person, because it's I statements. I'm saying what I believe is in the best interest of those involved. Expressing and communicating your feelings accurately, because you're not getting too emotional. You're just, the ultimate goal is the outcome. You're asking for things that you want, and you're able to say no to the things that you don't want. Because the love is also for yourself. Speaking your truth with love, also love for yourself. Sorry, Jerry. I care enough about my time and my ability to do this presentation well that I cannot continue moving forward as a team if I am the only one doing the setup. So we have to figure out how to move forward with this. Otherwise, we might have to find different teammates. It gives you the opportunity to have your interests, your needs, your wants, your concerns, and your fears met. And you also attain the respect of others because you're not afraid to say the truth. And ultimately, that's all we really want is the truth. We just want the truth and nothing but the truth. I would so much rather you tell me the truth in a situation and it makes me feel uncomfortable. It makes me feel upset. But then I am able to sit with that and I'm able to move forward in an authentic way. That is enormous. And that's how I believe we should all approach one another. Because again, if growth is our ultimate outcome, you can only do that with sharing the truth. It is only through hard conversations followed by meaningful action that we get anywhere. So have the hard conversations. Strategies for staying calm and composed during challenging interactions. So just because you speak your truth with love, just because you use active listening skills and empathic responses, and you rephrase and you've done all the check-in with your body and you know all the do's and don'ts, this does not mean that the conversations are always going to go in your favor. So here are a couple different strategies, again, that have worked for me. But that doesn't mean that all of them will work for you. It also doesn't mean that any of them will work for you, but I implore you to at least consider some of them. Assume the person is doing their best. This I cannot emphasize enough. If we assume that the person that we are talking to is doing the best that they can, then it becomes a teaching moment. It doesn't become a moment of attack. It doesn't become a moment of, why did you do this? What were you thinking? You're so stupid. This is dumb. Nobody cares. Nobody listens. It becomes this, like when you are teaching a child, right? And I have right underneath that, see the person as a child, because not to minimize the other adults that you're having these conversations with, but when you can see somebody as a child, it gives us a little bit more compassion, a little bit more grace for them when they respond not in the most favorable of ways, right? If I can see somebody as a child that has had an unmet need, or a child that is getting defensive because ultimately they just really don't want to not feel like they're not doing a good job and they're trying their hardest. When you can assume that, then it becomes a lot easier to speak your truth with love and to also validate their feelings. If I assume you're doing your best, and I also see that you are the expert of your world, regardless of what this conversation is, you are the expert of what you know. So I am the expert of my child at home. You are the expert of my child at school. You know schooling stuff. I might know a little bit of that. I know parenting stuff. You might know a little bit of that, of what it's like to parent my child, right? So seeing each other as an expert gives the other person permission to speak, because you are the expert on the school. It doesn't mean that I can't still advocate for what I believe in. It also doesn't mean that I can't express where I feel, the system has perhaps let my child down. But it also doesn't mean that I have to demean you as an individual. It also doesn't mean that I have to assume that you aren't trying your best, because there's so much more to the picture than what I know, right? It's quite possible you just put your dog down a week ago, and that's why you're a little bit testier today, because you are responding out of anger to keep from just breaking down and sobbing. I don't know any of that. So again, assuming that the people are doing their best can assist you in holding space for them and compassion for them and validating them. I know what I'm asking for is a lot on top of everything that you are already doing. I'm not trying to overwhelm. I am simply trying to see if there's a way that my child's needs can be met within this environment. I'm not saying you have to be necessarily the person to do it, but is there a way we can move forward, right? And looking for that common ground of, don't you think Timmy would do so much better if he did have somebody who could really work through his math with him one-on-one every day? Because I'm assuming you're doing the best. I'm assuming that you're the expert at school. Of course, you think he would do so much better. I also assume that you have a love of children because you're a teacher. So hopefully you like Timmy, right? My child. So that's that common ground of, you know what? Yeah, I do think he would do so much better. But we are so hard pressed to even have enough staff for every classroom. I don't see how it's possible in this environment. Okay, so then how can we get creative? Maybe it's utilizing a college student to come in for free and teach math to Timmy, right? We can think outside of the box. We can provide that support that I'm wanting outside of the box, right? But when we get into those discussions and it becomes a he said, she said, it becomes a you're not wanting to help my child, and then it becomes a you're just wanting to get mad at the school, then it's this just mess of things where, again, there's no growth because we're all fighting to be heard when ultimately we all want the same goal: the success of Timmy. Also, don't ask me why Timmy became the name, but that's apparently the name of this fictional child. Taking a break when you need to is really important as well, like I had said earlier. And then taking a step back and realizing it's not about you. The other person's reactions, the other person's defensiveness, the other person's, moments of shutting down or getting frustrated, or even their assertiveness, rarely does it have anything to do with you personally. It has to do with the entirety of their life, the entirety of their world perceptions, all of the interactions that they have had with people up to this point, how powerless that teacher might feel when, all of these parents are asking for these things and the teacher is only one person. And she wants to do everything, or he wants to do everything for these children, but continues to hit roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. So then you come in asking for, what seems like the impossible, and instantly that individual is in the defensive mode. Same for you're the teacher and you're having a conversation with the parent, and the parent is like, I can't help my child with math. I am not good at math. I don't understand math. And I don't know what else to do because I don't want my child to have the same struggles as me. I need your help. And so when the teacher comes and says, it's just not possible, we just don't have the people, right? That response of, ugh, you don't care about my child's success in their future, really has nothing to do with the teacher. It has everything to do with the internalized feelings and frustrations that this parent has been holding their whole life. Finding trends within your similar reactions. This one's really important for if you find yourself reacting to the same statement made by different people throughout your life. There's a trend there. I'll give you an example. Well, there's a trend, there's a moment of growth for you. An example would be, so my mother, I told you, has schizophrenia and bipolar, and all growing up, I watched the world interact with her and judge her. So for me, if you really wanted to get under my skin, you called me crazy. That was like my, oh, what did you just call me? Word, right? So I started noticing, oh, I get really upset when people call me crazy. Why? Why does that bother me so much? What is the medicine within this that I need in order to heal and move forward so that I am no longer having to hold on to that, right? So paying attention to yourself and what things continue to come up with you. Because again, these difficult conversations, they're growth for everybody. Breathe through your feet. So I have a good friend who says, when you need to, you just stand there and you picture straws in the bottom of your feet, and the straws go all the way through your body, and you breathe in from the center of the earth through the straws through your body, and you breathe out back through your head, through your body, down to the center of the earth. And you continue doing that. And you can do that really quickly. You can do it while you're sitting. It just kind of helps ground you. Any sort of technique that can help ground you, that can help reset your emotional body, is beneficial. And then reading between the lines. What is the person that you're having this conversation with? What are they not saying, right? What are they possibly feeling and not able to articulate, right? Without possibly liability or anything. We are all just reflections playing a part within the growth of another. When we understand this, truly understand this, we come to realize there are no difficult conversations, only loving conversations where we both give and receive the grace necessary for growth. Difficult conversations, growth conversations, they are not to be feared. They are to be embraced, because this is how we all improve. This is how we all succeed. This is how we all become our best self. Again, you cannot avoid conflict and be successful. You cannot avoid difficult conversations and truly have connection with individuals, because there is a sacrifice along the way. If I don't tell you that what you're doing is making me uncomfortable, then how are you to grow and how am I to grow? Because ultimately we need each other in order to grow successfully. So finally, I just want to say thank you so much for attending today's training. And I just kindly ask that you complete this short survey. If anybody has any questions or comments or insights, I would love to hear your feedback. I'd love to hear if there's any way I could grow. Feel free to have a difficult conversation with me and provide insight on how I could grow and potentially be, even better presenter. Because I'm already pretty spectacular. Just kidding. But not. No. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for taking the time today. Sending you so many moments of growth. Mwah.